Sporting situations can also cause great stress on the performer. Stresses in sports can include conflict, which may be arguing with another player or the coach, be competition, which mean there might be very high stakes or a lot of pressure. The physical reasons, which may be you could be stressed due to a bad injury, or you may have been brought off because you've been fatigued or playing badly. And the last one could be frustration. You may be playing badly, or there's another barrier to your success, which could be you keep being fouled by a certain player, and this will cause you to be stressed in the situation as you become frustrated. The physiological implications of stress can potentially have very bad negative bodily implications if it becomes excessive. The most widely accepted theory explaining it is Sellier's general adaptation syndrome, which has three parts. Alarm reaction. After perceiving the stressor, the flight or fight response is enabled through the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system as the body's resources are ready to meet the threatening situation. Resistance, which is when the body combats and compensates for these physiological changes, with the parasympathetic nervous system when it's stimulated, which has the function of returning the body to its original state as the body focuses resources against the stressor and remains hypervigilant. Exhaustion is if the stress carries on past the body's accommodation of the resources. These resources will actually become exhausted, ultimately leading to susceptibility to disease or death in an extreme situation. An description of the sympathetic nervous system when it's normally stimulated. It's after first perceiving the stressor. This is responsible for the phrase of flight or fight, which is after the release of adrenaline. When the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, many physiological changes will occur. If you were a goalkeeper and you were told to play outfield in a crucial game, that you may actually become stressed. Being told being told that your outfield would instantly stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, which may cause your heart rate and breathing rate to increase, along with the body temperature. You may start to experience dry mouth and your pupils may dilate. Your muscles may become more tense, but they'll actually get more oxygen-rich blood diverted to them, which can actually help in performance sometimes. A description of the parasympathetic nervous system when it's stimulated. We're stimulated to balance out the changes made previously by the sympathetic nervous system. They act as a resistance to the negative physiological changes and aid relaxation after perceiving the stressor. The same goalkeeper from before, he would now lose many of the bad implications from the situation when the sympathetic nervous system was stimulated. For example, his tense muscles would now relax, his dry mouth would go as the saliva production increases, his heart rate and breathing rate would come back down along with his body temperature, and his eyes would constrict. Controlling stress is very similar to managing anxiety. They split into cognitive and somatic techniques. The most effective somatic techniques include breathing deeply and slowly, warming up before matches, which is known as, you could say, loosening up, and the most effective cognitive techniques could include positive mental rehearsal, in which you use imagery of performing the specific skill, rational thinking, focusing on the performance rather than the situation. These can all prove very helpful in performance. Um, there, there are many factors that affect the ability to take part in certain sports. There are three main determinants that will stop or encourage someone to participate in these. These include personal factors, which could be one's income, education, personal motivation, etc. Environmental factors will be support of significant others, weather conditions, or like facilities, conditions at a facility. For example, your basketball hoop at your local gym may be broken, which will prohibit you from practicing there. Finally, activity related factors, which can include the frequency, intensity, of difficulty of the task. It's very common for someone to not take up a sport or health program as they believe it's too difficult or it takes up too much time. There are also psychological factors that can heavily impact the person's likeliness to do sports. For example, embarrassment can cause people to avoid trying their hardest, and as they don't want to be seen failing. Explanations for factors that affect people in exercise environments. The health belief theory. There are three theories for explaining factors that can affect people in exercise environments. The first is the health belief theory. This is basically a cognitive model which identifies the factors that indicate the possibility of an individual adopting a healthy behaviour. The first aspect is the perceived susceptibility. This refers to the person's perception that a health program or new sport, etc., is relevant, or that a diagnosis of illness is accurate. The results from our questionnaire we did showed us that there was a mixed range of perceived susceptibility. The question we used was, how likely are you to get diabetes on a scale of 1 to 10? 50% of the reasons for being susceptible to diabetes were the participants being very unhealthy, and the people that weren't susceptible said it was because they were living a healthy lifestyle. After this, the perceived severity is the perceived severity, which refers to how serious the perceived situation would be. For example, diabetes. 100% of our participants deemed diabetes as severe, and the most common perceived severity of it was 10 out of 10, which suggests all participants had very high perceived severity. Next is the perceived benefits, which refer to the patient's belief that the situation will benefit them. We asked them to scale 1 to 10 how likely they were to listen to medical advice. 100% of participants rated highly, which may be linked to their perceived severity. The last aspect of this model is the perceived barriers to exercise, which refers to the person's perception of the negative consequences, whether it's physical or whether it's physical, emotional, financial, or social. If they took action and did the new sport or health program, 75% of our participants perceived the barriers were laziness, and all participants rated those barriers 8, 9, and 10 out of 10 in terms of how much they were stopping them. This implies that the perceived barriers have a very high impact on not exercising. Trans-theoretical model. Trans-theoretical theory shows the stages that people go through to change behaviour. People move through different stages several times whilst trying to change their behaviour. An example of somebody who is unhealthy starting the exercise program becoming healthier can be used to explain this theory. The pre-contemplation stage would include the participant being unhealthy, not being on an exercise program, and not considering starting one. In this stage, the participant may be defensive about changing their program and starting it. In the survey we did, 50% of the people that hadn't considered starting a new exercise program, these people stated that the main reason for this was laziness, which shows the pre-contemplation stage, as they were still defensive about changing their behaviours. The next stage is the contemplation stage, where the person has understood that a change is necessary and they should become healthier. The person thinks they about starting a new health program and has the intention to start it. After this is the preparation stage, which is where the person may tell their family or friends they're going to start it, or they may have done other things, small things, to make the change before this, which could be eating healthier, etc. After the next stage is action. This is when the participant actually does the change and will take part in doing it. Participant has started a new health program and has been doing it for a week now. They have also started maybe eating more healthily. Maintenance is needed to continue the progress to become healthier, which is shown through the participant continuing the health program and having done it for 3 months. They start to encourage others to exercise and take more steps for themselves to improve. For example, exercising more and for longer. If these aren't done, you may relapse. Maintenance continues until termination takes place, where they have tried all the new exercise programs and have given up. Participant relapses during the maintenance stage and termination takes place. In our study, 100% of the participants had quit an exercise program, and the reasons were due to lack of confidence, not being able to afford it, and the other 50% of the survey stated they were just too lazy to continue. This statistic shows that even after the maintenance of an exercise program, relapse can take place and termination can occur. Theory of planned behaviour. The theory of planned behaviour specifies that some or all of the following 4 main psychological variables influence our behaviour. which are intention, attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioural control. And when all of these are positive, the changes will occur. These three initial parts of the model all must be in place for an intention to occur. However, there is an exception with the perceived behavioural control, which I'll mention in a minute. The attitude represents the person's negative or positive thoughts about the new sport or health program. For example, if they like the sport, they might find it boring, or they might find it boring. The subjective norm is what significant others or friends or family think about the particular situation or sport. What they all believe becomes the social norm, and this may affect your willingness to change your behaviour. An example of this could be if all your friends don't like the sport you are starting, and this may stop you from actually doing it. Finally, the perceived behavioural control is actually how hard it would be to make this change and what barriers there might be, whether it's resource or social based. A negative perceived behavioural control might be if you wanted to join a tennis club, but you may have had no racket. Perceived behavioural control can also fast track to behaviour without attitude or subjective norm in place if you have a very impulsive or spontaneous personality, which could cause you to make a change suddenly with no thought. When all three are in place and all three are positive, an intention will be made, which will lead to a behaviour, which could be physically starting a new sport health program. Through our questionnaire, we came to the conclusion that the attitude is the most powerful in making behavioural change. This isn't to say that the other two are less effective, but when we found that 100% of our participants said that they would start a sport they liked even if their friends disagreed. From this, we concluded that the subjective norm is far less important than the person's attitude, which actually somewhat contradicts the model. Thank you.